The people-pleasing pattern that always creates resentment. At my age, you get to look back at a whole lot of years and see the tracks you left behind, some straight, some winding, and a whole lot of them walked in circles just trying to keep everybody else happy. The other day, my old phone buzzed on the kitchen table right after I'd finally mustered up the grit to tell someone no, and there it was on the screen, just 3 words. Well, that's disappointing. I sat there looking at that little glowing screen, and for a second, just a split second, that old cold ghost of guilt tried to crawl right back up my spine, the same way it did 40, 50 years ago when my biggest fear in the entire world was letting someone down. It's funny how a few words can try to drag you back into the trap, but this time I just shook my head and chuckled a bit, because I've finally learned the hard way what happens when you spend your life running away from that little bit of discomfort. We worry so much about that text message, about that look of disapproval on a neighbor's face, or the heavy sigh of a friend, and we backtrack, we apologize, and we swallow our own lives just to make the air smooth around us. For a long time, I was the fellow who would have seen that text and immediately started typing out an excuse, changing my mind, offering a compromise I didn't want to make, all because I couldn't bear the thought of someone thinking poorly of me or feeling a moment of frustration because of a boundary I set. But I'm here to tell you, especially those of us who have walked this earth long enough to know better, that this old habit of ours is nothing but a slow leak in your soul, and it always ends up costing you the very peace you've spent a lifetime trying to build. Let me tell you about what happened just the other day, because the trap hasn't changed since we were young. It just changes its clothes. I still do a little pet sitting now and then, just for some extra pocket money and to keep myself moving. And a neighbor reached out asking if I could look after her dog, Barnaby, for a week. Now, I've watched Barnaby plenty of times at my own house. He'd just trot around, follow my routine, and it was easy, comfortable, didn't disrupt the flow of my days one bit. But this time, she dropped a little hint in her message, whispering that things would have to be a bit different, so I asked her what she meant, and she told me she needed me to do 4 drop-in visits a day at her place instead. Now, right then and there, my mind started doing that old arithmetic, calculating the miles, the time, the sheer weight of it, because 4 times a day means you are never truly free. You're just on a tether, waiting for the clock to strike so you can head out again. And then came the real kicker. She mentioned Barnaby's gotten old now, 15 years old, mostly blind, diabetic, and he needed regular insulin shots, which is a whole different level of care and responsibility than just throwing a ball in the backyard. I didn't want to just throw out a price and haggle like a salesman, so I asked what her budget was, and when the number came back, it was less than half of what I knew that kind of labor was worth, less than half of what I needed to make it make sense for my life. So there I was, sitting with the cold, hard facts right in front of me. 28 separate trips back and forth over 7 days, each one taking an hour of my time, meaning for an entire week, I couldn't leave my immediate neighborhood, couldn't go see an old friend, couldn't just sit on my porch and let the afternoon drift by without an alarm going off. That's 28 separate interruptions. 28 times my day would be chopped into little pieces. And before I had even typed a single letter back to her, I could feel this heavy, tight knot of anxiety tightening up right in the center of my chest. I recognized that knot immediately because it's an old acquaintance of mine. It's that resentment building up before I've even said yes. That bitter feeling that you're being backed into a corner by someone else's expectations. In the old days, because I wanted so badly to be seen as the loyal friend, the dependable neighbor, the nice guy who never lets anyone down, I would have just swallowed that anxiety, ignored the warning bells in my gut, and given in just to escape the awkwardness of the moment. We do that, don't we? We agree to things that wear us down to the bone, and then we spend the next week beating ourselves up, muttering under our breath, and feeling this quiet, boiling anger toward the very person who asked us for help, swearing up and down that we'll never let it happen again until the next time comes around, and we do the exact same thing because we haven't practiced the simple, necessary art of saying no. You see, we get trapped because we mistake that little pang of guilt for a sign that we're doing something wrong, as if feeling uncomfortable means we're being selfish or cruel to our fellow man. We've been taught since we were knee-high to a grasshopper that if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And somehow over the decades, we let that turn into a rule that says you aren't allowed to stand up for your own time, your own energy, or your own peace of mind. We end up ignoring our own feelings entirely, treating them like they don't matter a lick, while simultaneously taking on full, heavy responsibility for how everybody else feels, as if it's our job to keep the entire world happy and comfortable at our own expense. That is the ultimate people-pleasing trap, my friends, because every single time you say yes out of pure obligation, without looking at the real price tag it carries for your own well-being, you are making a terrible trade. You are trading a few fleeting minutes of someone else's disappointment for days, weeks, or maybe even months of your own deep resentment and frustration, completely throwing away the inner peace you deserve to have at this stage of your life. This time, though, the universe gave me a little bit of a saving grace because my neighbor took her time responding to my questions, leaving these long gaps of silence between her text messages, and that delay gave me the room I needed to just pause and think. In the past, if I looked at my calendar and saw those 7 days were blank, I would have said yes automatically, because I used to think that having free time meant I was obligated to give it away to anyone who asked for it. We don't think about future us, do we? We just want that immediate short-term relief from the pressure of the request, so we skip the hard work of standing our ground. We skip the discomfort of saying no, and we just sign away our future peace like it costs nothing at all. Even during those long pauses between her texts, I caught my own mind trying to play tricks on me, trying to negotiate against myself, wondering how I could bend my schedule, how I could make it work, how I could just say yes so I wouldn't have to face that awful heavy cloud of guilt. I was sitting there secretly hoping she would just stop replying altogether, wishing she would just find someone else so I could be let off the hook without having to do the heavy lifting of protecting my own boundaries myself. And right then, while I was sitting there spinning my wheels and hoping for a miracle to get me out of it, a simple question popped into my old head, a question that changed the whole game for me. I heard myself ask, if she called you up right now and said she found someone else, would you feel relieved or would you feel disappointed? The moment that question landed, a massive wave of pure, unfiltered relief washed over my entire body, from the top of my head right down to my worn-out shoes. There wasn't a single shred of disappointment in me, not a lick of regret over losing the extra money, nothing but an absolute, undeniable desire to be completely off the hook. Realizing that made something click deep down, because I finally saw how I'd been letting other people's feelings hold me hostage my whole life, as if their expectations were handcuffs and I'd just handed over the keys. I was taking on their emotions as if they were my personal responsibility to fix, believing that if my refusal caused them a moment of disappointment, then I was the bad guy who had done something wrong. So, with that fresh wave of clarity guiding my hand, I picked up my phone, typed out a message telling her straight up that it just wasn't going to work for me this time, wished her the best in finding someone else, and sent it off before that old guilt could wrap its fingers around my throat again. That's when the reply came back, faster than a hiccup, with those exact 3 words: "That's disappointing." I'll admit it felt like a tiny jab to the solar plexus at first, just a little ghost of that old familiar sting. But then I caught myself and actually let out a quiet chuckle right there in my kitchen. I laughed because I could finally see the whole silly cycle from the outside, realizing just how much of my own inner peace I used to throw out the window just to keep from hearing someone utter those 3 little words. The younger version of me would have immediately gone into a tailspin, backpedaling at 90 miles an hour, typing out long-winded apologies, and bringing up how old and frail Barnaby is, just to justify changing my mind out of pure sentimentality. I would have ignored every single warning sign from my gut, forced myself to make it work, and if I had managed to stick to my no, I would have spent the next week drowning in a pool of miserable guilt for letting a neighbor down. What I used to do, and what so many of us still do even when we've got gray hair on our heads, is willingly trade someone else's temporary disappointment for our own long-term, slow-burning resentment. This time, though, I just stood my ground, didn't offer a single excuse, didn't write a novel explaining myself, and simply allowed her to feel whatever she needed to feel without making it my job to fix it. It takes a long time, sometimes 80 years or more, to realize that when we live inside the trigger of our own guilt, we feel entirely powerless, reacting like a leaf blowing around in someone else's wind. But when you finally step outside of it, when you become a quiet observer of that little spark of anxiety, rather than letting it burn your whole house down, you realize their disappointment has absolutely nothing to do with your worth as a person. I had this profound realization that I was the one creating my own resentment by constantly saying yes to things that didn't fit my life, and that staying out of that bitter place is nobody's responsibility but my own. It has taken me nearly a decade of doing the hard work, practicing the reps of saying no, and sitting through those uncomfortable minutes of silence to finally claim my own freedom. But let me tell you, the view from this side is worth every single bit of the struggle. We are allowed, at every single stage of this journey, to put our own mental, emotional, and physical well-being first, and doing so doesn't make you a bad neighbor. It just makes you a wise caretaker of the life you've been given. The requests from the world are never going to stop knocking on your door, and that little twinge of fear about letting people down might never fully fade away. But you don't need the fear to disappear to be free. You just need to learn how to stand firm and let the waves pass right over you. I'm actually working on a deeper way to visualize this whole cycle, a little map to help us move from the pressure of a request to total peace without getting stuck in the mud of obligation, and I'll be sharing that full breakdown very soon for those who want to dive deeper into this journey with me. But for now, I just want to leave you with the reminder that your time and your peace are sacred, and protecting them is the finest gift you can give to yourself and to the world around you. I truly appreciate you sitting on the porch with me today and listening to an old man ramble about the lessons it took a lifetime to learn. Thank you so much for your time. Look after yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next one.